Luke, the author of Acts, recorded the apostles' Macedonian vision. That vision led him to cross over from Asia to Europe to preach the gospel there. His first stop was Philippi, and his first convert was the businesswoman Lydia. But the group of believers soon included the local jailer, converted by Paul, his prisoner. A decade later, Paul was in Rome in another prison, but the Philippians had not forgotten him. One of their own, Epaphroditus, had arrived in Rome with supportive gifts from Philippi. Nor had Paul forgotten them. From his cell in Rome, he wrote a letter to the Christians in Philippi. We can assume that Epaphroditus carried it with him on his return. Philippians is an epistle rich with memorable expressions and wise advice. As he was writing, Paul recalled a hymn that expressed exactly what he wanted to say, so he incorporated it into his letter. Dr. William Mallard explores that hymn with us and probes its meaning for us today. And that message is for each of us individually and for all of us collectively.
We're all aware of the story of Jesus in the 4 New Testament Gospels. Often we do not realize that Paul also tells the story of Jesus in one particular place in his letters. He tells it very briefly, but still he manages to include the outline of the whole story in a few verses. He does so in Philippians, the 2nd chapter. Listen to the opening section, beginning with verse 5. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. So Paul's story begins. This little story of Jesus, complete in 7 verses of Philippians 2, scholars tell us is actually a hymn of the early church that Paul decided to quote in his letter. The same way you might want to quote Amazing Grace in a letter you were writing to a friend. Evidently, part of another early hymn also is quoted in Colossians 1, 15 to 20. Here in Philippians, the quotation of the hymn really helps us better understand the whole rest of the letter, as we shall see. Let's look at this hymn story more closely and sketch a simple diagram of its meaning as we move through it, starting with verse 6. Though Christ was in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited. Here is the high status of Christ with God even before his birth, what later Christians would call his divinity. And we can represent it this way. Then verse 7, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form. That is, emptied himself of the special heavenly privilege of being God's Son, and became a human being among human folk. And verse 8, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Verse 9, therefore God also exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, verses 10 and 11, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bend in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Jesus' resurrected lordship, His heavenly divinity, gives the final great climax to the story. What do you think of our diagram? Jesus divine, then human, then exalted as divine again. Yet there seems to be something missing. Was Jesus divine only in the heavenly regions? Was His divinity not real down here on earth as well as His humanity? Was He not divine on earth when He raised Lazarus from the dead, when He turned water into wine? In another place, Paul says that God was in Christ, reconciling. Obviously, for Paul, Christ was divine on earth as well as human. Wait a minute, you say. Christ, both completely human and completely divine at the same time? You say, I just don't know how to conceive of that. But look, surely He was never more divine than when He was most human, suffering and dying on the cross for our sin, His divine transforming gift to us. His humanity and divinity don't conflict with each other. They confirm each other. Look at it this way. When two people love each other, their love makes them very powerful. I'd climb the highest mountain for you. But it also makes them vulnerable, able to hurt like they've never hurt before. If my beloved's heart stopped beating, my world would collapse. The power of love is like Christ's divinity. The vulnerability of love is like Christ's humanity. God loved us so powerfully that God could and did hurt with us, both powerful and hurting, at the cross. He emptied Himself and became obedient, even to death. If God can hurt with people, then God can renew, transform, and reconcile God's people. Paul's hymn story in Philippians tells what his congregations were discovering. The story of one who was equal to God, descending down to us in love, and then ascending upward for the renewal of all creation. That story gave a whole new outlook on the world. We call that new outlook, in biblical terms, an eschatological revelation. That is, a revelation of how things are finally going to be. Who would have thought that the Almighty Creator would join us in our pain and suffering in order to make everything new? Such a drama, like a cosmic act of worship, means that the world is different from what we thought. Paul's people lived in a different reality. Then they had to ask, how do we behave in this new reality? How do we belong to the Christ of the hymn? Much of the Philippian letter shows life in that new reality. Now the world is a place where hurts, isolation, imprisonment, like Paul's, can open the way to intimate love. And struggles like those of the Philippians can teach them how to hold one another up in unity, because the last word in creation is that even God has come down wounded in order to restore and heal and unite all in Christ's new lordship.